Okay, good evening. I will call this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board to order. Welcome everybody. This is the October 4th, 2021 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. Our first agenda item, as always, is public input. But before we get to that, I will make a couple of reminder and announcement or two and call the roll of the participants in the meeting. So, pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Grafton Planning Board is being conducted with both in-person and remote participation by board members and members of the public. Remote participation by the public for the public comment agenda item, the public hearings, and any other matter for which the board allows public participation will be via the Zoom raise hand feature. If you raise your hand on Zoom, you will be enabled at an appropriate point to enter the meeting via voice or video to make a comment or ask a question. In all cases, whether in person or remote, please identify yourself by name and address for the record. And because we have at least one board member participating remotely, every vote will be taken by roll call as per the open meeting law's requirements for remote participation. Please note that this meeting is being recorded as well as being broadcast live on the Grafton Community Television Government Channel. Now, board members present: Justin Wood.
Here.
Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Prabhu Venkatraman.
Here.
David Robbins is here. Associate member Maura McCormack. I see the name on Zoom.
I saw her unmute.
You not hear me?
Now I
Yes,
can hear
there
you.
you go.
Oh, hi, here.
Great. Outstanding. And of course we have with us staff, planner Christopher McGoldrick and office manager Natalia Allward. And at the appropriate time, I guess we'll recognize the participants in the various hearings and other things. So, proceeding on to public input, if there is any member of the public in attendance who wishes to speak on a matter that is not otherwise on the board's agenda for this evening, now would be the time to make your presence known either in person or remotely. And seeing none, we will proceed to the next agenda item, action item A. We have a draft decision on special permit SB 2021-06/SPA, site plan approval, 29K Circle for an accessory apartment. And the board has been provided with a draft decision.
Pull those up now.
This one is pretty routine. We've done a lot of these accessory apartments, and I think the draft decision here follows the model pretty closely. Any questions or comments on the draft decision?
Nothing I caught.
I did not notice anything that I thought needed to be revised. If no one has any questions or comments on the draft decision, perhaps a motion to approve along with all the usual baggage that goes along with the motion to.
So moved.
Maybe we could be slightly more specific.
Yes.
Such as
I move that we find favorably on all the decisions and on all the findings and waivers, and approve the overall decision, and direct staff to issue appropriate paperwork.
Second.
moved and seconded to approve the draft decision, basically to approve it as drafted with all the appropriate findings and waivers. A discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Call for a vote. Mr. Wood?
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger?
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger?
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman?
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Chris will get the paperwork out via the town clerk's office tomorrow, after which the usual 20-day appeal period will follow. Very good. Moving on to discussion items. First one being CCM survey collaboration. What's new or
Yep.
I know we wanted to bring it back up. Anything new on that, or just,
Yeah, so I reached out per the board's request, and I did get a email back, which I think was included in the meeting materials. Essentially, the CCM survey, that company is working on looking at cell service in towns. They typically do a survey along with the mapping that they normally do to allow residents to report dead zones that they have experienced. They noted that in communities where they partner to host the survey link, they typically get a large amount of response, and it helps them to provide a better mapping of their current coverage and address potential dead zones with future infrastructure. They're happy to provide us with a link to distribute and to participate in that survey. It would come at no cost to the town, hosted entirely by their company. So if the board would like me to distribute that survey via our normal channels, I'd be happy to set that up and send that out to the community.
Motion.
so their ask is simply for the community help to publicize the survey.
Correct.
Do you need a motion?
No, I don't think it's a formal vote is needed, but obviously if the board has any concerns with distributing that link, I see no issue with sending it out, but if the
Yeah.
board sees any.
Yeah.
Any concerns or objections from the board? Any comments?
It'll be interesting because every time that a cell provider comes around, they have their own maps. And, I'm not sure how this is going to play into that, but hey, the more we know, the better.
Yeah. My only comment is maybe suggest to the select board to bring them in their announcements. At the discretion of the select board, of course, but
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see if that's something that they'd be interested in speaking to before we distribute that out.
Okay.
Seems like a good idea. Do it.
Yep.
Without objection from the board, this will proceed as outlined. Next item, complete streets.
So I have no update for complete streets or mill redevelopment overlay, so I would we can just skip over those if that's amenable.
Okay, next topic under discussion is subdivision rules and regulations update. I did send out a draft 8 with a couple more changes highlighted compared to draft 7, but I sort of combined the highlighting. There's sort of one substantive topic we have to talk about, and that is the turnaround extensions, for which I've provided a sort of a presentation / document. But other than turnaround extensions, is there anything else that the board would like to comment on or think about with respect to the subdivision rules at this point?
I think you caught up on all the other stuff I sent you.
Yep.
Haven't
Oh, I did have one question for the board. As Bob had noted in a comment, the traffic study requirements in the subdivision rules talk about requiring a traffic study only for a residential development of 20 houses or more, leaving up in the air the question of, well, what about a non-residential development? And so I revised the draft of the subdivision rules to include a requirement for a traffic study for any non-residential subdivision, but it did raise a question in my mind. And that is, unlike in the case of a residential subdivision, a non-residential subdivision likely will not have the uses of the lots very well defined. I don't know of any place in Grafton where I would anticipate a non-residential subdivision be developed. But the question does remain as to how meaningful a traffic study can be when you don't know what the lots are going to be used for. And you don't know, like, the commercial or industrial uses that might be made of them. I think the board would generally like to see a traffic study of some sort, but it's probably going to be a little bit less well-defined if the subdivision is non-residential. Any thoughts on that? Just throw that out there. We can think about it for the next time if we don't really have any. But any thoughts off the top of your heads?
Having a traffic study that's less than perfect is better than not having a traffic study at all. Just as, we've been questioning about some of the related items on 244 Worcester Street and traffic study for it. For example, trip generation, which is a lot of what you were just talking about today. You can do that. In some cases, it'll be pretty clear that it doesn't make any difference. In other cases, we can drill down into insisting on how well covered it is.
My off the cuff thought is, if a applicant thinks that a traffic study is not substantial and not going to be beneficial for their project, we still have the waiver ability for them to request a waiver of a traffic study.
Yep, I think I would tend to be aligned with that thinking. My thoughts were almost exactly the same as you had expressed it, Bob. A traffic study that has some credibility would be more useful than leaving the traffic totally out of the picture while we deliberate on a subdivision design. So yes, I think with the understanding that it's going to be less precise because the trip generation characteristics may very well be let me put it this way: the trip generation from a non-residential subdivision may have a wider range of uncertainty, but you can still probably come up with something meaningful. And as Justin pointed out, if it's truly something that would be meaningless, I mean, yeah, we come up with a number, but we can show you why it's really meaningless. Well, the board can consider that on a case-by-case basis, but I'm inclined to leave it in.
Can we get a non-residential subdivision that doesn't require a special permit?
I believe most commercial uses, most commercial uses in town will, by their own nature and by the zoning bylaw, would trigger a special permit. And so, but I think having it at the subdivision phase, as we're kind of discussing tonight, and having that kind of first preliminary look, which may not be as fleshed out as you would have for the actual specific use, but that gives you two bites at the apple. You get the preliminary report, and then when the specific uses are decided and they go, they trip their special permit, you get a second kind of look at the entire.
Yeah, so for the moment, at least, I'll leave it in. We can, this will not be the last meeting at which we discuss subdivision rules. So if we have some further thoughts, we can. We can refine our thinking to whatever extent necessary. And then the other topic on subdivision rules is the question about turnarounds, where we have this nice little provision that when you have a dead end, a cul-de-sac with a turnaround, we want you to wherever possible to reserve a right-of-way off of that turnaround so that you can extend the street to a neighboring property or even another entirely separate phase of your subdivision. And what happens because we also allow a reduced frontage on a turnaround. So do we want to go through this sort of, have you all had a chance to read this, and so should we take it more in the terms of questions or hitting certain points, or should we kind of go through this?
I looked at it. I sent you a note which is less well focused than I'd like, because it's particularly to me how does the land get redivided, new lot lines drawn, and so on? Who owns the easement? How does it get exercised? there's a whole list of concerns,
Yes,
we may have, incidentally, an interesting case tonight in our first hearing,
yes,
which illustrates an interesting case
right.
relative. I'm not sure that you drew that one, David, with the easement going through the middle of a lot.
Well, turns out that something very similar came up years ago. A somewhat similar, a situation that at least at this stage looks very, well, shouldn't say that, but anyway. So this whole study raises some interesting questions, and sort of the bottom line in my mind after reading through all this and thinking about it, and Bob's sent me some comments and observations and questions that sort of reinforce this point, is that if you don't plan these out, some of the sketches I showed here, if we can, I think in particular look at a couple of those examples that I put in there.
Give me a headache, some of them, Dave.
So, I mean, this first example is there's not really a problem here.
Who owns that easement?
Well, that in itself is an interesting question, because the future street could be reserved by the owner of the property, that is the developer of the subdivision, or the future street could be divided between the two adjacent lots and in the form of an easement on those properties. Either way, the future street could ultimately be built, but the question of who owns the future street, it's either an easement that's owned by the town, or it's the entire right-of-way that's owned by the town. And that can vary. There's so many variables in these pictures that we're only looking at a few examples, but there are so many variations. But even when you look at this the page that's on the screen now, you see that it starts to look a little bit awkward when you didn't plan for this, because you've got the minimum frontage here on these two lots, and in order to get them up to the minimum frontage when they're no longer on a turnaround, you got to draw this funny zigzag line. And this example doesn't look too bad, but it could be made worse. And I noted on the next slide here that
Somebody probably has agreed to sell, transfer land that they have to somebody else in most of these cases.
one way or another, it's quite possible.
And so there's no assurance. We don't have the power to take it away or force it.
Yeah.
Like I say, headache.
Right. So if you're looking at the situation on the screen now, you can draw that red zigzag line there, and the turnaround was part of the town right away. So you're drawing a line. You're not. Although I've noted on the slide that land could be swapped, but in this particular case, you don't have to. I mean, the town can give up the unused part of the turnaround to the two abutting lots, and that's probably not particularly difficult. The town's not going to have any interest in holding on to that. But it gets more complicated. It can get more complicated. I mean, this looks a little bit awkward. You go to the next configuration, and that starts looking a little bit more awkward. And in fact, here there's no way for Lot B to get its frontage without taking something from Lot C. And if Lot C has already been sold and is now under private ownership, you get into the potential problem of, well, maybe Lot C doesn't want to give up any of their land. So this is where it starts getting difficult. Now, this is sort of an extreme situation with 50 feet turnarounds or 50 feet frontages. It's a flexible development. That's the only way you could really squeeze that many lots onto a single turnaround in that space. But nevertheless, it's a hypothetical possibility. And that starts to illustrate that it can get awkward pretty quickly. And again, then on the next slide, that shows that it just mentions that, yeah, you could swap some lot lines around, but now you've got potentially the town owning part of the turnaround. You've got 3 lot owners that might have to get involved. and it gets a little stickier. And then the next one, that is, while you could find a way to do it, but it really starts looking awkward and complex. And even though I've suggested, going on the next couple of variations of this diagram, I mean, this is utterly useless as frontage for Lot C, even if Lot D is willing to give it up. And there's a couple of workarounds that you could try, but I mean, the bottom line is, in a configuration like this, sort of the overall observation is Lot C basically has, it's very difficult to gain access to it once you've eliminated the turnaround. The next slide. One way to get around it would be to give lots C and D an easement over that, so they can use someone else's land to drive over. That's awkward. Common driveway, it's another awkward situation. I mean, this, again, this is kind of an extreme situation, maybe, hopefully not likely to ever come up in practice. But nevertheless, this shows some of the possibilities and some of the awkward and adverse and consequences and possibly things that are difficult, if not completely impractical to deal with, when you have a situation like this, when you can, you start out with a reduced frontage on the turnaround, you eliminate the turnaround, now you don't get the advantage of the reduced frontage. So if you plan for this in advance, when you're designing the turnaround and the lots on the turnaround, one of the things that you probably want to do is not take advantage of that reduced frontage on the turnaround. Anyway, and there's what else? Then there was a couple of examples of, these are the examples later on are the, Glenwood Lane, Morgan Drive, and Appaloosa Drive are the three places in the entire town of Grafton that I could find where this has actually happened. Glenwood Lane was planned out, and actually they changed the planned route of their extension. If you go down a couple of slides there, and I'm kind of skipping over some of the observations. We'll get back to some overall commentary on that. But Glenwood Lane had an original plan, as you can see here, with 4 lots around the cul-de-sac and the road kind of going off, bending a little bit to the right. They didn't build it that way. They built Lot 2 and Lot 5A that way, and I think they built Lot 4A that way. But then when they came around to doing the roadway extension, they took Lot 3A out of the picture entirely. Ran the extended right-of-way through what was Lot 3A, and used some pieces of Lot 3A to add on to Lot 2 and to Lot 4A and other lots. So they ended up with a configuration that worked pretty well. You'll notice they did actually take a chunk of land away from Lot 4A and put it on 5A. That was actually a transfer from one property owner to another. The rest of it was all done. None of the rest of it was developed. So the first part of that subdivision is developed. Is, I think, altogether 5 lots, 3 of which are shown here in color. So
Recall that there are 2 different theys here. The they that did the five houses with the turnaround, and then a new they several years later who picked up the pieces.
Yep.
I think it was, whatever, bankruptcy or repaired or whatever. Picked it up and tied into land further east.
and fortunately for
But
them,
it was different parties, in the first part and in the second part.
so this is the one instance where there was an actual land swap from one lot owner to another. It did happen and it worked out, but as you've noted, Bob, what happens if the owner of Lot 4A doesn't want to give up any of his land? Of course, in this case, he got more land in return. So that unless he
One reason he might not want to give up that land is to keep the additional subdivision.
Yep. So that's always a potential that you have to worry about when you're
Right.
designing a situation like this is, if you're counting on being able to transfer a part of a parcel from one owner to another, you really can't count on that for sure.
Unless you have some sort of provisions.
Maybe you planned ahead and worked in some kind of an agreement or an easement or an option.
Right, which is where in a little bit, hopefully, we'll
Yep.
get to.
So the next example on Morgan Drive, that was, see, the first part of Morgan Drive was North Grafton Estates Phase 1, if I remember correctly. They planned it with the turnaround. They had a street extension planned. They left out lot 8 and 9 on the map, but not developed. So when they came back in Phase 2, with a whole nother subdivision plan, and finally ended up extending the road, they actually put the roadway extension in a different place. Lot 9 still exists in the shape as outlined in red here. Lot 8 and ended up being divided into 3 lots. But this was all under control of the developer, so there wasn't any private owner that we had to worry about swapping land. This is the developer owning the land and just reconfiguring it, redrawing the lines. So although the extension didn't go exactly in the place it was originally planned, they didn't run into a lot of trouble because they didn't have to deal with multiple owners and potential conflicts. And then the last example I've got here is Appaloosa Drive, which is a work in progress. The road actually has been built. The turnaround is gone. And lots 15 and 16, as shown here, had no problem with getting the necessary frontage because they have plenty of frontage on the extended road. So there was no issue here either. The disposition of the property here has yet to be determined. I think, as far as I know, the town still owns the turnaround right away. Lots 15 and 16 still own up to the center line of that roadway. What will ultimately happen? The town has there is a roadway easement, and whether that easement is given to the town or whether the property underneath that easement is given to the town in its entirety, that has yet to be determined. And whether the town hands over the unused parts of the turnaround to the abutting property owners, that also has yet to be determined. I would think it would, but there are just so many potential complications here that one has to worry about. The next slide, I just sort of, roughly speaking, what happened to the turnaround? It is expected, but not required, that the abandoned portions of the turnaround added to the abutting lots. It's fairly easy before the turnaround becomes a public way. Whoever owns it, can dispose of it and transfer. They can. Again, this is what they can do, not necessarily what they are required to do. After the turnaround becomes a public way, as I noted before, the abandoned portions of the turnaround ideally would be transferred from the town to the abutting property owners, but again, there's nothing in place to make that happen.
Right. That takes a town meeting vote, doesn't it?
It will take a town meeting vote to transfer the property to the abutting property owners. A town meeting vote followed by the execution of a deed. Similarly, acceptance of the roadway is, of course, a town meeting vote as well. But there are a lot of moving pieces here. And it occurred to me too to wonder, could the turnaround be left in place? Next slide.
And why? We have had a few cases where a no longer used right of way was not given up and was later used.
Yep.
For a development.
Of course, my question about would there be an advantage to extending the street but leaving the turnaround in place? Absolutely not. I don't see anything at all. But because first of all, it doesn't solve any problem about meeting frontage requirements. Because once the road's gone through, the turnaround is no longer a turnaround in a cul-de-sac, qualifying the abutting properties for reduced frontage. And I did find one instance of Grafton where a turnaround was left in place, and that's at the end of Rose Lane. When Brielle Road connected to it, they left the turnaround in place, but that's not terribly relevant to the current discussion because that's old stuff. So,
Okay, okay, Dave? You're still,
so the last thing I'll say on it for the moment is that all of this shows us that while in many cases it may be possible to redraw the lot lines to give, to eliminate the turnaround and give the abutting lots the additional frontage, it's often going to look awkward, and it's sometimes going to be so difficult as to be impractical, and it's subject to a number of things that are likely beyond the control of anybody at the time it's designed. So overall, I have to say that I think that it's probably a good idea for us to consider, along with that requirement for reserving an extension, to say something about ensuring that when that extension is built, if and when it is built, that all of the lots that were abutting on the turnaround can get the necessary frontage without a great deal of difficulty and awkwardness. I don't exactly know how I would write that, but I think that's the general idea, is that if you're going to reserve that extension, you really need to plan ahead for when that extension is put in place.
right.
And
that's
there's a
what
lot
I
of
wanted-
details that surround that general idea.
That's what I wanted to comment on a little bit. Just one thing first, on example number one of the solutions would be to just hold that 50 feet, hold that out, but that's a whole lot. That's the frontage for a whole lot while it's on the turnaround. So that's not real easy. But then the other thing is, I think you get down to something about requiring a practical plan that is satisfactory to the board to assure the viability of the extension we're trying to provide, and leave it to discretion in each case. In some cases, they're going to try to prove that the land's not developable back there, and all sorts of things like that during the subdivision, that trying to build the cul-de-sac. But I think that there may be a fairly simple formulation that says satisfactory to the board.
Yeah, that's pretty much the lines along which I was thinking. I'm not going to try it out. I don't think it's, because there are so many different ways that this can play out, because there are so many possible variations on the configuration of the lots and the roadway design and everything else. I would simply say something along the lines that you just suggested, a practical plan that is acceptable to the board for extending the road in a way that all of the lots can maintain compliant frontage.
Yeah, I think we can have better language, but not tonight.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well-
I can work on proposed language for that.
Short and simple is good. Leave it where you can to.
Yep.
Because every case, as you demonstrated, every case, including the one later tonight, is the same. Everyone is different, and as soon as we set down a set of rules, someone will start figuring out something different or something new. Every time that we put in zoning or put in rules, people start immediately figuring ways around them. Yeah, that's good. I noticed that it's now at 7:30.
Anybody else on the board have any comments or questions about this turnaround business? We can always continue talking about it at our next meeting. I will see what we can come up with for a proposed rule to cover this. At this point, any other comments, questions? Anybody? If not, it is time for public hearings. We have two on the schedule for tonight. One, the one at 3 Centennial Drive, I think should be quite brief. So if the board is comfortable with taking that out of order, we might be able to dispose of that quickly, and then reserve the bulk of our time for the the new project at 124 North Street rear.
That works for me.
So this would be a continuation from last week, the modification of site plan approval at 3 Centennial Drive. Where we left off last week, as I recall, was the board had not had an opportunity to review the revised plans and the peer review report. And those have now been posted for the board's review. And I will ask if there are any questions or comments on that. The public hearing is still open. We left the public hearing open so that we could receive the additional materials.
I looked at the dates on Jeff's peer review, and I don't think it was on the website, because he didn't get the papers. So until the next day, I think. In any case, what I noticed was that he had a few comments, certain things that should be resolved, thought, which, as far as I know, haven't been resolved. I didn't see anything on the website about a resolution for them. So, I don't know where we stand on that.
Chris?
So we did, received the peer review. The two comments that were included were in terms of the stormwater calculations being supported by a report or narrative. High Point Engineering did provide a response letter indicating that they do have the stormwater reports and pointing to those. The other comment was in relation to water lines and the location of the accessory building as proposed, and that there may be some conflict with those the utilities in that structure. The response from High Point was that they will coordinate with the fire department and Grafton Water District to resolve that. Obviously, I defer to the board's judgment, but I believe that both of those may be able to be handled as conditional items in a decision. I did provide a draft decision. I think that in terms of the stormwater calculations or the water lines being relocated, if those are, if there are any necessary adjustments to be made, those could be handled as minor modifications to the approved to the decision if approved.
Did you actually have that in your decision?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So not as drafted. So I drafted the decision prior to having the comments received. So those two would need to be added.
I'm happy to move that we approve with those additions.
Yeah, I might suggest that we close the public hearing and deliberate on the decision. Is there any other input to the public hearing before we?
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we close this public hearing, having received all the information we expected. Any discussion on the motion? If not, Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. I neglected to ask if there was any comments from the public before we close the public hearing. I'm guessing that there probably aren't. Hopefully. Anyway, okay, motion carried. We closed the public hearing, and I believe we have a motion that wants to be made regarding the draft decision.
I think when we say including discussion tonight, that's usually Justin. Makes that.
Yep.
Sure. I'll move that we find favorably on the decision, including all. Was there waivers?
I don't believe there was waivers for this.
I don't remember. That's what I was just checking. Well, as drafted with the discussion tonight.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded that the board approve the draft decision with all the favorable findings and waiver approvals required, and take into account the additions in the form of conditions that were discussed tonight. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All in favor? Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And staff.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the vote. Chris, I'll follow up with you on the responses.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Grow that business.
And now, we have a new public hearing on a preliminary subdivision plan at 124R North Street.
The Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, October 4th, 2021, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider the application for preliminary plan approval for a 4-lot residential development on property located at 124 North Street rear, 73 rear Old Westboro Road, 4 rear Village Lane, and 25 Magnolia Lane, as shown on Grafter's Assessor's Map 30, lots 26A and 250, and Assessor's Map 39, lots 3 and 4A. Said property is located in a low-density residential R40 zoning district. The applicant is Circle Assets LLC, and the owners are Mary Beth Realty Trust, Magnolia Farms Association Trust, and Circle Assets LLC. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.graftonmass.gov on the Planning Board Department Development Projects webpage. This is a hybrid meeting conducted in person and by remote participation.
All right, so to begin with, if you have anything to any sort of introductory remarks, Chris, otherwise we'll begin with the applicant explaining the project to us.
Yeah, I'm happy to defer to the applicant. I will note that this did come to our development team meetings as a preliminary kind of discussion with staff, and we did review that together with the applicant. But I will let them introduce the project, and I will bring up the site plans as well.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Vito Colonna with Cornerstone Engineering. And I don't know if we could let in the applicant, who is Scott Goddard for Circle Assets, and George Connors is also with Cornerstone Engineering. I think they're both in the, I don't know if you call it waiting room or whatever.
The attendee pool.
The attendee list. Yes.
Oh, there's Scott. I see him.
Yep, Scott Goddard's here. Thank you, Vito.
All right, I'll start up while George is getting in the meeting also. So this is a project at a site off of North Street and access off Magnolia Lane. We were here maybe 2 years ago, a year ago or so, looking at the same parcel of land for a larger project. I think at the time it was 36 lots proposed at the time. With the main access being off North Street. So since that time, though, we've kind of scaled back the project. The process kind of got bogged down a little bit, and we're looking at something, much more scaled down, something that we could, try to get something moving on, something a little bit more manageable. So we're here before you for basically a 4-lot subdivision now, just a small cul-de-sac off Magnolia Lane. So as you said in the intro, it is consisted of basically 4 parcels. It's about 73 acres overall. And there's a large parcel in the back that makes up the bulk of the land. That's owned by Circle Assets. And then there's also a parcel of land kind of on that plan there shown as lot 1, basically. It's kind of that kind of tail off to the right. That's another parcel, a separate owner. And then there's also the access point up to Magnolia Lane, which is a 50-foot wide strip of land that was reserved back when they did the original Magnolia subdivision. And it was reserved as a parcel basically for future roadway purposes. And there's an easement over that for roadway and utilities. In the way that that's written, it's specifically for roadway extension, any use of a roadway commonly found in Grafton. So our proposal is a conventional subdivision consisting of 4 lots. We are in the R40 zoning district, so all the lots do contain at least 40,000 square feet of area and the 140 feet of frontage. We have a little excess area and frontage on these parcels, so they're not down to the minimum requirements. The roadway itself is about 500 feet long with a cul-de-sac at the end. It's a 50-foot wide right-of-way with 26 feet of pavement. The grading of the roadway itself is fairly flat, where we have 1% to 3% grades throughout the cul-de-sac, very manageable, trying to match grades. We've kind of managed the cuts and fills pretty balanced. There's no large cuts or large fills. We're kind of just going with the existing grade as we come through there. Also for the roadway, where that intersection is up with Magnolia Lane, there's sufficient sight distance in both directions, both intersection and stopping sight distance. I think that's kind of one of the reasons that area was selected during that original subdivision design. It's a good access point to get off that roadway. As far as utilities go, we have water accessible from Magnolia Lane, and there's also sewer out in Magnolia. We've proposed right now to show as a gravity sewer system, so there's no pump stations required. But we do, sorry, my dog just came up to me. But we do have the option later to discuss with sewer department about potentially looking at pump stations just to reduce some of the fill. But we can access that by a gravity system if need be. And that's what we wanted to show on this, to be a compliant plan without any really waivers needed or anything like that. One of the items that I know there was just a lot of discussion on is we also did provide a easement as what's required to access the rear bulk of the land. The rear area, there's about 64 acres still in the back of the project. That would be retained by the owner. There really isn't any future plans right now. Like I said, there was previously that larger subdivision, but all that really did get kind of, like I said, bogged down with the process. So really they don't have any defined plans of what will happen out there, but we did want to provide that access point if in the future they do want to do that. I know that there was all that discussion there, and this was a unique situation where it didn't meet any of those ones that you kind of just outlined, where the access does split the lot down the middle. But we could, get into that a little bit more detail if there are questions on that, on how you would rectify all the lots. Basically, you just have to make them all whole. This one's not quite as complicated with the frontages, just because the larger frontages are not down to the 50-foot like in most of those examples. We have a little bit more frontage to play with. So it's really not as complicated. It's just a little unique where it splits the middle of the lot. We also provided just a rough stormwater sizing, collection, everything from the roadway, send it down to a basin on the plan left side of the page. There's plenty of room down there. We rough size that to accommodate this roadway. Obviously, this is preliminary plan, so nothing's finalized as far as the sizing, but I did run a rough calculation, so that's approximately the size that would need to be. And there's plenty of space down there and elevation to get all your drainage down to that point. I think that's really kind of all we had to show to start. We can kind of take questions. I had some other plans on my screen if you wanted me to share that kind of show the overall parcel, just to get a better idea of that. I don't know if you wanted me to show that or not. And yep, I can share that. Oh, I was disabled from sharing right now.
You should be able to share it now.
Okay. Okay. Just so you can get an idea of kind of where we are, these highlighted parcels, these are the four basically parcels that we'll be working on. This is Wesson, Magnolia, kind of loops around. There's North Street, and it's bounded to this side by the Mass Pike down in there. And this is kind of the overall parcel. Right up in here we have, this is the access point we've been kind of talking about. That zoomed in plan we were looking at is right up in this corner. It actually shows up on this. You can kind of see what we're looking at. So this is where the development that we're proposing is, and this is the bulk of the remaining land. There are wetlands running through the site. There's some topography changes down in here. It's fairly steep right in there. There's a kind of a little ledge face right up in here. So, but this is really the area over in here that we were looking at. In here, I just wanted to show you for context what the remainder of the site had looked like. And this was a zoomed in version. I just kind of colored it up a little bit, just so you can see that. Okay, I guess if I want to turn it over for board comment.
Yeah, okay. Questions, comments from the board?
Sure. So, first question, the PDF I have makes it a little bit harder to read. What is the length of that cul-de-sac?
We're at 500 feet.
Okay.
Measured to the center.
I think I'm right to the end of it. Yep. Yeah, it's right to the very end of it. 500 is right there.
Justin, any more?
Go ahead, Bob. I had more, but I forgot them. So
Going on.
I'll come back around if you don't get them.
I've got a couple of things on the mind. First of all, I thought this space got covered back with the larger project, but Jeff's peer review, pointed out an issue with the neighboring driveway and the rounding on the left side as you leave onto Magnolia Lane. And when I look at the town GIS, it seems to say that there's only 106.9 feet there. And that's not enough. I think I'm pretty sure that's not enough. Normally you need 50 plus 30 plus 30. I think. Don't give. In any case, I'm not sure whether the frontage is there. You're going over where somebody else is built, and I'm interested in how that is working out.
Okay, I think I'm understanding this. So you're this remaining parcel right here. You mean this frontage?
Well,
Is this because this is a separate parcel itself?
I'm talking about, first of all, the frontage. I'm talking about the width is where your roundings for your road come out. And are they on? I don't know whose land they're on. I don't know how. I'm just not sure that I can see that it's compliant.
Okay.
Crossing some driveway.
This is a separate parcel right here. It's its own parcel with the roundings and everything. So it's currently a separate piece from the abutter. The separate parcel.
The town website, GIS, says that you only have 106.9. See where I mean?
Yeah, like right there. How you see? Yeah, is that what you're looking at right there?
And I don't think that that's enough. So we need to explore that a little bit and figure out what that's all about. 40, 25. All right. I don't want to divide by pie right now, so we'll figure that one out later. The other one is, I see that cul-de-sac extension easement appearing to run through the middle of lot 3. So I don't understand how lot 3 is really viable to build on. You can't put a house on that extension. This is part of the conversation we were just having earlier tonight about how all the complexities of converting a cul-de-sac into to have an extension on it.
Mhm. Yeah, if this became a future roadway, yeah, we'd have to make lot 3 whole again. I think we do have the lot area here to create that, to maintain a lot, or even this side over here. I think each side has potential to be a lot in and of itself. But we could, I think after seeing that whole presentation, maybe we have to give a little bit more detail on how that may break out in the future.
That's basically what I was saying we needed to do for our rule, was to, for us and you folks, developer, to work out satisfactorily and on the record and with necessary whatevers to assure. It's our job to assure that there is a practical and reliable way to accomplish the extension.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that and give a little bit more detail on that.
I'll also be interested in. I see a fairly steep cut. It looks like to fit the circle in to the bottom and to the left sides of the circle, which includes where that extension is. So I'm curious about the grades in there, cross section through there. I think it's the C. Oh, and your easement goes through, is that wetland?
Yes, this is a wetland that starts right up in here, that darker green color.
Right. So we really need to know how a road would get extended through the wetland. This lot, this set of parcels has always had this wetland stuff, hasn't it?
Right, yeah, any future extension would obviously, it would have to go through conservation to be able to get permitted to be able to do that. Also, this plan would also need conservation, once, if it ever moves forward to get to the definitive phase, we're in the buffer zone. So any future roadway definitely would need conservation approval.
So I'm not at all sure that is practical. A practical thing, and it looks like I can't tell very well what the contours are. If the easement went where it would avoid the wetland, run into a steep slope there on the right of it.
Yeah, that's almost a vertical face. It's a ledge face right there. So it goes up 10, 20, 25 to 30 feet. It's actually kind of nice when you see it. But we're going to hug that bottom of that slope and just kind of tuck by it.
Doesn't make it very easy to get a roadway over there. You have to go through the wetland. And now we've got Dave can help us understand. He's had some experience with wetland regulation as to how that would work out.
Yeah, and that's in the future, if that were pursued, would need approval both through your board and conservation. So everyone would have a chance to be able to review that. We're just showing where the intended place would be. Not that it would be permitted now. It's just that's where the intended roadway.
But would it be even permittable. I'm not sure that, I don't know whether Concom can or would allow that to happen. I'm wondering whether.
Yeah, and that's, I think, just something that, you'd have to deal with at the time.
No, I want it to be, I don't want, we're trying to assure that it's a viable plan. And it's not clear to me that it is. So I'm trying to nail that down a little bit.
Yeah, it's probably fair to say that there are probably more than one potential obstacle to further developing this road. I mean, we've just been talking about the one, the sort of ledge on one side and the wetlands that it would have to drive through. Typically, a wetlands alteration can't be more than 5,000 square feet. I don't have a sense of how much this would be. But another one of the obstacles to worry about is this is it's actually, let's see, it's a 60-foot diameter turnaround, so you're actually, you could go 30 feet farther and still get to the 500-foot measurement, because that's the 500 feet is from the intersection right away at Magnolia to the center of the turnaround. So you got a little bit more, the turnaround could go slightly farther, but extending it beyond that, unless it can connect through to somewhere else, you're not going to be able to extend that dead end much farther because you're already at or very close to the limit. And while the board may and has in the past granted some modest waivers from the 500 feet, to reach the remainder of the property, basically down below the bottom of the screen here, might not work at all, might be something that could not be approved unless there was a connection through to somewhere else. And I remember we explored some of those issues in the previous go-around on this property. And there's a larger wetland system elsewhere on the property that kind of stood in the way. I don't know that we ever resolved the question of whether or not a through street was possible. So that's something that without a concrete plan in front of us, we really can't make any judgments. But it's probably fair to say that there are some potential obstacles to ever being able to, in a practical manner, extend this road. Nevertheless, if there is at least the possibility, that one wants to reserve the possibility, then one would want to show that this is at least potentially viable and that we can work around that. And I think that's kind of maybe part of what you were getting at, Bob, is that for this future right away to make any sense at all, there has to be a reasonable sense that it could ultimately be built. And if that can be obtained, then there's a question of the impact that's going to have on the frontage of the other lots.
Of course, this is a preliminary plan.
This is a preliminary plan.
Right. So that even if we weren't satisfied about all that, we could deny it, we could say no, it wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah. I mean, to me,
except that they'd be on alert, warning that there's a problem that
if I look at this plan on its own without considering future expansion, it looks fairly straightforward. It's a cul-de-sac that falls within our limit. It's 4 lots, all of which meet the area and frontage requirements for the configuration shown. And I don't know that there are a lot of issues. At least it's not off the top of my head. I don't see a lot of issues other than this question about the future extension. Chris?
To that point, and obviously I'll defer to the engineers in this regard, but I'm not sure if there's opportunity to consolidate the future easement and what's proposed as the drainage easement. Obviously it probably depends upon the specifics of the wetlands crossing in the future, but I know that avoids topography and seems to be located at an area that has a narrower, wetlands area. So there may be potential to consolidate that. Obviously, a future roadway would also be able to be engineered to assist with the runoff or the drainage infrastructure that's currently going that way anyway. So if there's opportunity to consolidate those easements, that might be one way to kind of look at that. But obviously that would need more of an engineering look at that I'm not qualified to speak to. So.
I don't think that's something we can all collectively figure out tonight, but yeah, I think that sort of suggests that something to look at here is what are the alternatives available for a future roadway easement? Can something be proposed? To Bob's point, that that doesn't necessarily have to be finalized at the preliminary plan stage.
Right. I mean, right now, what we're really looking to permit is these 4 lots, like you said, that were pretty straightforward. This is just to show, a possibility of where they intend to, or where they'd like to come through. It doesn't mean that this is necessarily what it has to be, as far as wetland crossings, this is probably the better spot to cross, even though it has a little more area than down here because it's at the top end. Down here, you'd get into stream crossing standards, possibly. I don't know if there's a stream channel in there. And then getting a road down this way, you have your topography. Obviously, you have, 10, 20, 30 feet of elevation change. So in all practical sense, just going straight through right here is the the most feasible location to put the roadway. But really what we're here for is just really approval of these 4 lots. There is no real plan for the future of what this may be down here. And it would need a connection through, unless a waiver was granted, but that's a future discussion. I think this is more just to show where it was intended to be, and if that ever may arise, would be back before the boards and the commission too.
Yep, I do think it's worth keeping in mind that the point in the subdivision rules for drawing a future extension is to make it feasible to extend this to somewhere else. I mean, it's in the interest of trying to make sure that our roadway network is connected as it can be.
Right.
And
that's why we thought this would be the most feasible spot to do it. I understand fully about trying to make all these lots whole and show the frontages, and we can show how that would happen up in there. But as far as getting into permitting of the roadway itself, I think that's a discussion for a future time. This I understand how you were earlier talking about who would get what pieces of land and how that would work, just to show that it would work out or could be worked out pretty straightforward. And we can do that for you. As far as the permitting in the future, that's a future issue, I think.
Yeah, I think in our minds, particularly given the discussion that we had earlier this evening, a future roadway extension is not going to be practical if there's no good way to reconfigure the lots around the turnaround so that everybody has the compliant and comfortable frontage. I think we'd all like to
that makes sense.
avoid some of the really weird pictures I drew. I think for the board to be satisfied that the future connection is there, if it is ever needed, we would like to see that if not on the preliminary plan, that's something to keep in mind for the definitive. And I think ultimately the board would want to be convinced that the proposed future roadway is feasible in order to approve that on the definitive. Now that's kind of a bit of a subjective judgment maybe, but I think the board would like to feel that yes, there is a real possibility for a connection here, whenever it might happen.
I think. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that sounds good.
Okay, 2 things. One is, I'm just thinking, all those contours around the circle. What is that? Are we going up or down? I can't read the drawing well enough.
So it's going down, going downhill right there. Yeah. So at the top, we're pretty much close to grade. I think we're a max 6 feet or less even through the cul-de-sac. And then this is just trying to catch grade as we go down.
Okay, yeah, to the left of the cul-de-sac,
Yep.
it goes down
Yep.
towards the, whatever, the mason, whatever there is.
Yep.
The other thing is that I think there are two reasons that this rule is in the subdivision rules. One of them is to protect the property owner, that this access would benefit. I can see a possibility of we might be able to consider the property owner of the property this connects to waiving that protection and saying that they're satisfied with what's down. An assured solution. Seems it's the same people, isn't it? Same people, same owner.
Same. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that. I think it was broken up a little bit.
The land of lots 1 through 4.
Yep.
Are owned by the same interests as all this other remaining land.
They would be. Right now, some of this land up in here is owned by a separate entity.
Up in, I've got two things I'm looking at. Up in where?
Up in, lots 1 and 2, generally that area. A portion of that land is owned by another entity. So I can show you on the GIS.
I'm particularly thinking about the land down there where 26A and 250 meet, where Lot 3 meets.
Oh, right here.
Where Lot 3 meets the remaining land.
Yep.
Where this proposed extension.
Yeah, that would be still owned by the same overall owner.
So I'm suggesting a possible solution is a waiver by that property owner as to our responsibility to make sure that there is connectivity to the adjoining land. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
That might be a path around this problem, because I think I'm not sure whether you heard me say, but one of the purposes of our rule is to protect the owners of the adjacent land.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's the same owner. Okay.
But I think we'd have somewhere in the process, we'd have a waiver of any issue there. That sound like, does anybody think that's a good idea?
That certainly cannot hurt if the owner is willing to provide that.
Well, I'm saying that it might avoid a lot of our need to figure out and document and all of that.
The only thing is it wouldn't preclude them from in the future extending this, to access that backland. Even if there weren't an easement here, but they still retain control of Lot 3, and could make all the frontages whole, they could still extend that through even without an easement, because then you would just create a new right-of-way.
Right. Well, it would be okay for you to show the easement, but we wouldn't have to drill down quite as hard.
Okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yep.
But the waiver would be attached to the remaining land, so that, say, if it got sold,
yep,
somebody else, which
okay,
I don't see it happening.
Yep.
That would be part of, that would be a burden on that project.
Okay. That sounds.
There's mud.
I do have a potentially simple question. The wetlands that are on your screen right now, that are depicted on the screen, were those delimited by a relatively recent survey that you guys as an applicant did?
Yeah, those were from 2020, I believe.
Okay.
And Scott, you're on the line. Did we go through the ANRAD for this?
Yes, it was ANRADed and peer reviewed by the Conservation Commission's agent.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, that's not reflective on our GIS that we have. So I was just I was just double checking.
Anything else from the board at this point? Is there any information that we would like to receive that we have not yet received that would give us reason to keep the hearing open? Now, I mean, before we settle that, even
Yeah,
if there's
public
nothing-
input is one
if
thing.
there is nothing else from the board, are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this, ask questions, make comments? I see a hand raised on Zoom and a hand raised in the room. I saw the one on Zoom first, so I'll take that one.
Tom Rush should be able to speak now.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We
Yep.
can.
Yes, thank you.
Great. My name is Tom Rush. I am a resident on Magnolia Lane, and I have a question with respect to this easement and the potential for extension of this road to this additional 63 acres behind these four outlined lots. This plan had been presented to our neighborhood several years ago with a specific description of that cul-de-sac being on its own and not being part of a connective traffic to the other part of any potential development for this entire parcel. It seems like that has changed, and I don't know how that we can even look at a 50-foot right-of-way as supporting, more than four houses behind what is existingly a pretty busy neighborhood street. So, I just want to raise that as an issue. That it seems to me that, not only do you guys need to consider the feasibility of this plan, but also the impact of this plan on the existing residents next to the easement that is there, and also the potential for the future and the impact on Magnolia Lane.
I can make a couple of brief comments in response to that, and of course we can follow up on that as necessary either now or in the future. But first of all, the plan under review now is for a 4-lot subdivision, end of story. Consideration of the future, if a future development is proposed, leveraging that future extension, that if it is larger, or if it is large enough to be of any concern to this board, the traffic impact of that on Magnolia Lane will be taken into account when the board is reviewing that future project. There's no question about that. That's our standard procedure. So what we are reviewing right now is a 4-lot subdivision and the impact of that on Magnolia Lane. The impact of any future development will be reviewed at the time such future development is proposed, if ever.
Okay, it seems to me that this is really a 3-lot development with 1 lot that's really being reserved as an access for the larger parcel at the rear. But since they can't get access from North Street apparently for that parcel, so seems to me that is the issue here. And looking to the future, that's going to be problematic for us.
I understand that, and as I said, any future development will be reviewed for its impact on Magnolia Lane or wherever else it might have any impacts.
Thank you.
That part will not be forgotten. There's only so much we can do within the context of reviewing this specific subdivision.
Thank you.
I had a hand raised back here in the room. Now you can come up and sit in the chair or stand at the podium, whichever makes you more comfortable, and let us share your thoughts with us.
I live at 124 North Street, and that is on the other side of the Mass Pike. I just was wondering why it has 124 rear on it when I don't know how it's going to be accessed at all to any rear side of my land when the Mass Pike goes through it. And then the only other thing was I didn't know if any amenities or anything like that, like sewer and all that stuff, would be brought in on North Street with any of that new development or anything.
To my knowledge, nothing. The reason it's designated as 124R North Street is that's the address that the assessor has for that large the parcel, which is most of the land and most of this development is on. So that's considered the address of the parcel, even though the current development proposal is nowhere near North Street. Kind of a bureaucratic, technical matter. And
Did we get a name for him?
Oh, could you just?
Oh, my name is Tyler Smith.
Yeah. So yeah, as stated, I think. Let me see if I can pull up the overall plan, which will show. Yeah, so the parcel existing, so the parcel that's being, the development is largely over in this area here, includes this parcel, the parcels up, in this portion, but also this is the 124R, extends along this area as well. So it's a large parcel, and that's why the notice goes out as that, noting all those addresses. In terms of the utilities, that's not proposed to be accessed off of that road at this time in the preliminary plan. So,
Chris, do you have any idea how small your pointer is on my screen?
yeah, so the 120, I can zoom in here.
Make your pointer bigger.
So North Street is in this location here. There is the portion of the access along this portion of the road, but the development it's a large parcel. So the development that's being proposed currently is up on the opposite side, utilizing this extension of Magnolia Lane to access the back of the parcel. Oh, Vito, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that little access you're pointing to is between 124 and 126 North Street. So there wasn't an address to be able to give it. So they just call it 124R, like for rear. So it's the rear behind 124 or 126. That's the only reason. There wasn't an available number to give it, I think, at the time.
There are some occasional things that look kind of odd like that when the assessor assigns a street address to a parcel of land that it's kind of away from any street. It's only got that small connection to North Street, but they gave it a North Street address.
Yeah, my very
Then
back of the napkin
the
kind
other
of map
question-
is showing
Sorry.
it's yeah, back in napkin math is showing it's about half a mile as a crow flies from North Street to where this furthest edge of this development would be. Back in napkin math.
Any other
So-
questions?
Nope, that was just it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Chris Emirati. My wife and I, Sherry, also live in 27 Magnolia, with the abutters right on Magnolia. And looking at this plan, it's very small and very hard to read. I'm primarily concerned with the grading easement that is looking like it's going right over my driveway, right literally up to the garage doors on my existing house, and how that would affect water runoff, anything, going into my property. This driveway's been there for 12 years, since we built our house back in 2009. There's potentially spots for the houses, which are a concern. I really, I'm concerned with how they would look, and would they fit in with the neighborhood. But primarily, I'm concerned with the frontage of that cul-de-sac road, and how it would cross my driveway, and potentially would that driveway be impacted.
Back to one of my questions here. I can't tell who owns what on this plan. It looks like the rounding is going through your driveway. Either your driveway is not on your land, or he thinks he's gonna put it on your land, or there's something we're not getting.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. I can zoom
Yeah.
right in on that area.
Yeah, I think you have a better resolution than what was uploaded.
Okay, so I'm gonna zoom right in. So this yellow line right now is the current property line. So this yellow line right here comes up and comes across. That's the current property line for number 27. Kind of comes up like that. This existing roadway and grading easement, that was an easement created during the original Magnolia Lane subdivision. And that's just an easement that goes along with this yellow parcel here for future roadway construction purposes. So that driveway right now does go off-site. It goes off of 27, crosses this parcel to get to Magnolia Lane. This little sliver right in here is a piece that does run off-site, off of the abutter site, onto the subject land, this little sliver right here. As far as the question related to grading and, as far as drainage and such, everything from our roadway and everything would be collected on our site and wouldn't be directed towards that way.
So you're saying that the parcel of land that's in question that crosses my driveway is that little sliver at the front, not the 200-foot long driveway that goes to the back of my property?
I'm just the roadway itself. I'm just trying to get the question. Yeah, so this one right here, I'll zoom out just for a second. So this is right now where your driveway is.
Correct.
Right.
That 225 feet long, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, so just right at the very end, it was probably originally, whoops, hold on, wait for my screen to load. So right at the very end, it does cross over the property line, because right now, so this yellow line right here, that kind of my cursor is going down, that's that's the common property line between you and this parcel here. So it kind of hooks over, and where it hooks over, there's a little spot where so the driveway does cross over. That's all.
Okay, I realize it's preliminary stages, so there'll probably be more information further on down.
Yeah,
This is developed
yeah, I
more.
think we'll have to. And it would be all right if the applicant even contacted you directly to kind of go over anything.
I would like to meet with them, yes, if that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it might be good to have a meeting set up.
Yeah, so that would be an issue that at the definitive stage would likely have to be addressed. Some of the comments that were included in the peer review was there may be potential to relocate the driveway or tie the driveway into the proposed roadway. So again, that would involve negotiations with the two private parties. So you and the developer could kind of coordinate and decide which option is most appropriate.
Are you saying that there is an easement for his driveway across your rounding?
No, there's not.
Well, then the driveway is on your.
Yes, just this little piece down at the end. It is. Yes.
Well, that's not going to do because the town wants a clear,
Right. That's why I think the applicant and the abutter probably need to get together if that's at all possible to.
Yes, that configuration as it exists with the driveway crossing the rounding at the intersection. And just the fact of it crossing the rounding is an issue. The fact that a small piece of your driveway runs across someone else's property, and who knows why it was built that way, as close to the property line as it is. But in any case, as part of a development here, I would expect the developer to work with you to resolve any conflicts that arise due to the location of the driveway. As it's shown here, there's another rule which I think our peer reviewer pointed out, that a driveway should be at least 50 feet away from an intersection. And this driveway goes right through a corner of the intersection, so that's sort of, that's really not going to work out too well. So, as Chris said, I think at the definitive plan stage, that's something that assuming that this project does go forward with a definitive plan, which it probably will, that the project proponent will very definitely want to get together with you and try to work out an agreeable arrangement for however much driveway relocation might be necessary.
Okay.
But yeah, it's as it stands, it's a problem. And then there's that grading and the roadway and grading. There's, in addition to the property boundary, then there's actually an easement that appears to go onto your property, all
right, and that's what I'm kind of questioning. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how to read these plans. So.
Yeah, and I would assume that that easement gives somebody, I don't know offhand who benefits from the easement, and not having read it, but presumably it gives the developer of the roadway the right to go onto your property in that easement to do some of the work. Whatever they do, I think the plan here does not show any permanent alterations within that easement, as far as I can tell. But again, those are details that will be worked out. I mean, and anything they might want to do in that easement, I would assume that you would be involved in any negotiations regarding what's done within that easement.
Okay. Yes, definitely correct. Yeah. And the applicant right now really, he'd love the chance to be able to work with you abutter there, try to come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Okay. The question was asked a little bit ago, is there more information we need? From my point of view, either we get answers to this now, or I'll vote no on the preliminary and let you solve it at definitive. I hope others would too. I'm not sure whether anybody has any idea what I just said. Yeah, even you.
No.
Okay.
Did you have anything else?
That was my main question.
Okay, well, thank you.
So the point being, do you want to do it now or later, and that might drive whether we close the hearing or not.
You're asking whether the board would like to see some of these things resolved now or later?
No, I'm asking the proponent. Would they like to keep the hearing open and get us resolutions now, or would they rather have me and maybe some of the others vote against the sub.
If I could ask, is there any way we could just continue and leave it open? That way we could maybe work through some of these issues.
Oh, yeah, we absolutely.
And then you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
one way or the other if we could ask
Yeah.
to continue.
I don't think anybody on the board would object to continuing this process for as long as it needs to be continued to get accomplished whatever you'd like to accomplish. So we'll get. I think we're generally willing to give you as much time as you think you need to
Okay.
work through some details.
Yeah, I think just one more meeting, maybe just to kind of work through a couple of things we talked about tonight.
Yep. And
Just so we can, if we get a few things, we can get a little feedback from you first.
Yeah.
Before we close everything.
I'll say out loud, just for me, I would like to see your as the applicant's response to the peer review on our record as well. I'm sure that will be coming anyway, but I figured I'd call it out.
Yeah, we can do that too. Yeah, that way everything is kind of closed up. We tie all the loose ends up before we can. Hopefully
Yeah,
move
I'm
on.
sure you'd like to get as many things settled as you reasonably can at this preliminary plan stage, which maybe make the definitive plan stage go a little bit easier. Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just in one final comment in terms of resolving the driveway, especially if we're digging a little deeper into that. I would just also recommend to reach out to assessors and fire department or police department, and probably both. Just in terms of obviously addressing and dispatching emergency services, that can sometimes be a hiccup that we want to avoid before we get into the definitive.
Okay. So
Well, I'm happy to do extension. I mean, we already know how to continue hearings on this parcel of land.
Yep. Yep, and our next regularly scheduled meeting is 3 weeks from tonight. If you think 3 weeks would be enough time for you to make some progress, you can come back in 3 weeks. If you'd like longer, we can we'll give you like I said, give you as much time as you feel you need.
Okay, well, let's shoot for the 3 weeks. If something comes up, we can always, I guess, put it off. But I think we should be good with that. Good with
Okay.
3 weeks.
Is there anything else from the board at this point? Any other comments or questions from the public? If you are making a request to continue this hearing to October 25th, then the board can act on that request.
Okay. Yes, we are.
Procedurally, you can verbally state the request now and follow it up with a request in writing, typically by email. That's done these days.
Okay. Yeah. We request the continuance to the 25th, and I'll follow up with an email.
Sure. I move that we accept the applicant's forthcoming written request based on his verbal request to continue this hearing until October 25th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m.
I think we're granted.
Grant, yes, sorry.
Accepted.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Justin,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Linda. Did I hear an aye from Linda?
Aye.
Ah.
Sorry.
It came through kind of odd. And Prabhu
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are continued to Monday, October 25th at 7:30 p.m. And for everybody's information, if you want to come back and participate in that, you're more than welcome. Having said that, and thank you to all the applicant people, and we'll look forward to hearing the next round of information and discussion on this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Two.
Okey-dokey. Next on our agenda, we have bills. I don't think we have any bills waiting approval,
No bills. No minutes.
and I don't think we have any minutes of previous meetings awaiting us.
Nope.
We may have a staff report of some kind.
We had a busy week, but I don't have a staff report prepared at this time.
Well,
Week was too busy.
We missed last week's too.
All right, did anybody see anything in the correspondence that caught their eyes? Do we have any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
I have one quick update, Dave, from the Library Building Planning Committee. We had the monthly meeting today, and while everyone is aware of the delays due to supply chain issues and so on and so forth, one of the aspects I thought which would be relevant was there might be a potential, there might be a possibility that we might go above and beyond our funding opportunities for the project. We are at this point of time within the approved budget and the additional funds that were mobilized. We are under 45K, that's the sum, but there are still some pending change orders and so on and so forth. So by the time we have the meeting next month, we might know where exactly do we stand. And Evan was there on the call, so as needed, it would be brought to the attention of the powers that be between the select board and others.
They have some idea of how they could go about paying any overage. I don't remember how you do that.
There was some campaign, there was some library campaign funding, Friends of Library and so on and so forth, to the tune of about 250K. So that helped us manage some of it. That the 45K is factoring in the approved budget plus that 250K, and then we still, our headroom is only 45K, but my gut feel is it's going to go above, beyond that. That is a punch list of items, pending items that need to be addressed before the library is truly in a moving condition.
Okay, anything else? Are there any other items which may lawfully come before the board?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, Justin?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Linda? Prabhu?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.